Most people spend their entire lives believing one simple promise, that if they work hard, save a little each month, and trust the system, their retirement will be safe. But here's the shocking truth. In America today, nearly 1 out of every 5 retirees has already run out of money within just 5 years of retiring. Decades of effort, gone in a flash. Imagine waking up one morning, ready to enjoy the peace you've earned, only to realize your bank account is empty. Your savings vanish to your future uncertain. For millions, that nightmare is real. And tonight, we'll uncover the untold stories of those who lost everything they'd spent a lifetime building, and what their journeys can teach us before it's too late. For most Americans, retirement isn't just an ending. It's supposed to be a reward. A lifetime of long shifts, early mornings, and missed vacations finally leading to peace. But behind the quiet smiles of many retirees hides a truth they rarely speak about: the fear of running out of money. Statistics show that over 40% of retirees depend entirely on Social Security, a system never designed to carry an entire life. Many worked tirelessly, trusting pensions that disappeared, companies that folded, and markets that crashed without warning. Some watched their savings drain slowly with rising medical bills. Others lost it all in a single bad investment or a scam they thought could never happen to them. Imagine spending 40 years building your safety net, only to realize it was made of sand. Every number in their bank account once carried dreams of traveling with their spouse, helping their grandkids, or simply living without fear. But when the statements stopped coming and the balance hit zero, one question echoed in their hearts. How did everything they worked for disappear so fast? When people think about losing their retirement savings, they often imagine it happening to someone careless, someone who didn't plan right. But the truth is far more unsettling. Even the most disciplined savers, the ones who followed every rule, are falling through the cracks. Inflation, hidden fees, and unstable markets are quietly erasing decades of effort. In 2023 alone, the average American retiree lost nearly 15% of their total savings due to market drops, money they can never earn back. For someone in their 70s, that loss isn't just a number. It's months of rent, medicine, and meals. Many retirees now sit in their living rooms staring at old bank statements, wondering where all those careful years went. They remember the nights they skipped dinners out, the vacations they postponed, the little sacrifices they made for later. But now that later has arrived, and it doesn't look anything like they imagined. Fear slowly replaces comfort, and dignity turns into dependence. They ask themselves in silence, was saving even worth it if the system was never built to protect us? The painful truth behind those lost savings lies not just in bad luck, but in how the system quietly turns against the very people who built it. The retirees who did everything right are often punished for trusting too much. Many invested in safe retirement accounts, believing their money would grow slowly and securely. But hidden management fees, market crashes, and inflation quietly erase their nest eggs year after year. What once seemed like a stable $300,000 savings could suddenly buy half as much as it did a decade ago. And for millions depending on fixed incomes, that difference decides whether they can afford their medication or their next meal. The government safety nets, Social Security, Medicare, were meant to protect them, but rising living costs have outpaced those benefits. That's why those retirees who thought they'd be comfortable now find themselves cutting back on food, skipping doctor visits, or even looking for part-time jobs at the age of 70. It's not carelessness. It's a silent system failure. The truth is, saving was worth it, but only if someone had told them how fragile their savings really were. So now the real question becomes, what could they have done differently? And is there still a way to rebuild after losing everything? Among the millions who lost their retirement dreams, one story still echoes louder than the rest. A story that reminds us how fragile security can be, even when you do everything right. Her name was Eleanor Hayes, a retired nurse from Ohio who had spent her entire life caring for others, but forgot that even caretakers need someone to protect them. For 42 years, she worked double shifts, saved diligently, and trusted her hospital's pension fund, a fund she believed was as stable as the walls she walked through every day. Like so many others, Eleanor wasn't greedy or careless. She just believed in the system she had served her whole life. But when the economy shook in 2020 and markets tumbled, Eleanor's lifetime savings of nearly $280,000 started shrinking before her eyes. At first, she thought it was temporary. The market always bounces back, her financial advisor said. But weeks turned into months and her balance kept dropping. Each dollar disappearing felt like watching her future fade away. The Florida trip she dreamed of, the small home renovations she planned, or even the thought of helping her grandkids, all of it seemed to dissolve in silence. She wasn't alone. Thousands faced the same heartbreak. Yet for Eleanor, the pain was deeper. She had built her life on helping others heal, but now she couldn't heal her own broken faith in the system. That night, as she sat in her dimly lit living room staring at the empty cup of tea beside her, one question refused to leave her mind. If even doing everything right can still lead to losing everything, then what hope does anyone have left?
That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. The silence in her small house felt heavier than ever before. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, everything reminded her of the life she thought she had secured. For the first time in years, she opened an old wooden box that her late husband, Tom, had built decades ago. Inside were handwritten notes, grocery lists, medical bills, old bank receipts, and one yellowed envelope labeled, "For Our Future." Inside it was a small note he had written years ago. "Whatever happens, promise me you'll never lose hope." Those words hit her harder than any number on her bank statement. The next morning, Eleanor decided she couldn't sit and watch her savings disappear. She packed away her fears, walked to the nearest library, and started researching everything she could about what went wrong. Market crashes, pension freezes, scams targeting retirees, and new ways seniors were rebuilding their finances. What she discovered shocked her. She wasn't alone, not even close. Thousands of people across America were facing the same collapse, but some had found ways to rise again. There were stories of retirees who learned new skills, started small businesses from home, or invested in safer community projects. For the first time in months, Eleanor felt a flicker of control returning. She realized she couldn't change what she'd lost, but maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild something new. Yet deep down, a fear still lingered. Was she too old to start over? And if she tried, what if she failed again? The next week, Eleanor made a decision she hadn't dared to make in years. She applied for a part-time job at a local community center. Not because she wanted to work again, but because she needed to feel useful. The idea of sitting alone, waiting for her savings to vanish completely, terrified her more than facing a new challenge. When she walked into the center that morning, clutching her small resume with trembling hands, she half expected them to turn her away. But the manager, a kind woman named Linda, smiled and said, "We could use someone like you." It wasn't much, a few hours a day helping seniors with health appointments and paperwork, but it gave Eleanor something money couldn't buy anymore: purpose. As the days passed, she began to connect with other retirees whose stories mirrored her own. People who had lost their savings, homes, and confidence. One man, George, had once owned a small bakery before the pandemic forced him to close. Another woman, Ruth, had lost everything to an investment scam. They weren't bitter, they were broken, yet trying to rebuild. In their shared pain, Eleanor found quiet strength. She started journaling again, writing down everything she learned about resilience and adaptation. Then, one evening, while closing the center, she overheard George mention something that stopped her in her tracks. A local program teaching seniors how to manage digital investments safely, designed to help them recover from losses and protect what little they had left. It sounded too good to be true, but the curiosity in her heart refused to stay quiet this time. As she walked home under the dim streetlights, she whispered to herself, "Maybe this is where my second chance begins." Still, one question echoed through her mind as she stared at the night sky. Could this opportunity truly help her rebuild, or was it just another risk waiting to break her again? The next morning, Eleanor gathered the courage to visit the community hall where the digital investment workshop was being held. Rows of gray-haired faces filled the room, some curious, others skeptical, but all united by the same quiet desperation, the hope to rebuild what was lost. The instructor, a retired banker named Mr. Dawson, spoke gently, aware of the fear that often came with words like stocks and investments. He explained how seniors across the country were learning to use small, low-risk tools to regain financial control. Things like community bonds, micro-investments, and digital savings platforms that actually protected rather than preyed upon retirees. Eleanor listened, wide-eyed, her pen trembling as she took notes. For the first time in years, the word future didn't sound painful. After class, Mr. Dawson approached her and said something that stuck with her. "Eleanor, money comes and goes, but knowledge stays. Learn this, and you'll never be powerless again." Those words ignited something deep inside her. Not greed, but dignity. That night, she stayed up late, rewatching online lessons and reading about how people her age were regaining control of their finances. It wasn't easy. The world of apps, passwords, and online security felt foreign. But she refused to let fear stop her again. Weeks turned into months, and Eleanor slowly began to see results. Her small investments started growing, not fast, but steady. Each gain brought her confidence back, each mistake taught her patience. She began mentoring other retirees at the center, sharing what she'd learned. The woman who once stared at an empty account now helped others fill theirs again. But deep inside, Eleanor knew something larger was still missing. She had learned how to rebuild her savings, but could she ever rebuild the peace of mind that money was supposed to bring? Was financial recovery enough, or was there something deeper she still needed to find? One chilly autumn evening, as the leaves turned golden outside her window, Eleanor sat on her porch holding a letter that had just arrived in the mail. It was from her bank, a summary of her new savings account. For the first time in years, the numbers didn't make her heart sink. Instead, they gave her a quiet, grateful smile. She had managed to rebuild a small but stable fund through her new skills. It wasn't much, not enough for luxury, but enough for peace. Still, that night, as she looked at the fading sunset, she realized something surprising. Money had never been the real problem. What truly broke her wasn't the loss of dollars, but the loss of purpose. Retirement, she thought, wasn't about stopping life. It was about starting a different kind of living. That realization changed everything. She started volunteering at the community center, not for pay, but to teach other seniors what she'd learned. How to protect themselves, how to start small, and how not to give up after failure. Her small evening classes began to fill up with people who once felt lost like she did. Every story she heard reminded her that behind every financial loss was a person craving hope, not money. She found herself laughing again, connecting again, living again. One afternoon after class, a young reporter from the local newspaper approached her, saying he was writing a feature about seniors rebuilding after financial collapse. He asked if he could tell her story. At first she hesitated, her past still carried shame and pain, but then she thought of Tom's note, "Never lose hope." Maybe her story could help someone else not fall apart the way she once did. That night she stood in front of her mirror and whispered softly, "Maybe this is what Tom meant. Maybe hope is meant to be shared." But as her story began to spreading across town, something unexpected happened. Something that would test everything she'd learned about trust, resilience, and faith in people once again. Could Eleanor's newfound peace survive what was coming next?
A few weeks after Eleanor's story appeared in the local newspaper, her phone started ringing more often. Strangers from nearby towns, retirees, widows, even younger people worried about their parents began reaching out for advice. For the first time, Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in years. Needed. Her evenings filled with calls, her mornings with coffee meetings at the small diner near Maple Street. The waitress there knew her order by heart. Black coffee, no sugar, and often said, "Miss Hayes, people talk about you like you're a local hero." Eleanor would smile, humbled, but deep down she was still cautious. She'd learned the hard way how quickly trust could turn into loss.
One morning, a man named Calvin Brooks approached her after one of her community sessions. He was charming, well-spoken, and claimed to be part of a nonprofit helping seniors invest in safe community projects. He praised her wisdom and said he wanted to collaborate. Her story could inspire thousands, he said. For a moment, it felt like fate. A bigger platform meant helping more people. But something in her gut whispered caution. She'd seen too many smiling faces hide sharp intentions. Calvin handed her a glossy brochure filled with promises. Guaranteed returns, risk-free, support for seniors. It all sounded too perfect. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the brochure. She wanted to believe it. The idea of turning her painful journey into a movement that could protect others was beautiful, almost healing. But the fine print looked familiar, hauntingly familiar. The same phrases she once ignored years ago when she lost her savings. Her heart raced as she realized the truth. This was another trap, polished, professional, and preying on hope. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "How many more of us will they try to fool?" The next morning, she decided she wouldn't stay silent this time. She gathered her notes, emails, and records, determined to expose the scam before anyone else fell for it. But as she prepared to take action, one terrifying question haunted her. Could she stop this new wave of deception before it destroyed others? Or would speaking up cost her everything once again? That evening, Robert sat on his porch, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The same trees he once planted with his wife decades ago. The cicadas hummed their song, and the quietness of the small town wrapped around him like a soft blanket. For the first time in years, he wasn't afraid of silence. He embraced it. He looked around. The laughter from Millie's diner faintly carried through the breeze. The neighbors' kids played with their dog, and a gentle smile crept across his face. Retirement wasn't the end of his story. It was just a different chapter, one that didn't need deadlines, meetings, or alarms. He realized something powerful that night. Peace doesn't always come from having more. Sometimes it's about needing less. The small town, once unfamiliar, had become home, not because of its quiet streets, but because of the people who filled it with warmth. As he took a deep breath, the stars began to appear one by one. Twinkling softly above him, he whispered to himself, almost like a promise, "I didn't retire from life, I finally retired into it." And in that moment, with nothing left to chase, Robert found everything he had been searching for all along. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into quiet seasons. Robert's life in the small town began to settle into a rhythm that didn't rush, didn't compete, didn't demand. Every morning, he brewed his coffee, opened his old journal, and wrote one line about gratitude. Still here, he'd write sometimes. Other days, peace found me. He started noticing the little things, the sound of rain tapping gently on the roof, the laughter from across the street, the way morning sunlight painted gold on his porch. These were the moments he'd missed while chasing success, the kind of wealth no bank could hold. One afternoon, while sitting under the oak tree behind his house, he thought about all those years he'd spent worrying, about money, time, and what people expected from him. And then it struck him. Retirement wasn't about stepping away from work. It was about stepping closer to yourself. He finally understood. The real purpose of retiring isn't to stop living, but to start living differently, slower, deeper, and with meaning. The small town didn't give him peace. It simply reminded him that peace was always within him, waiting to be heard. That night, as the wind rustled through the leaves, Robert smiled and whispered to himself, maybe this was the answer I'd been searching for all along. Not how much money I needed to retire, but how much life I needed to feel alive. The night sky above the small town was quiet, just a blanket of stars scattered like forgotten memories. Robert sat on his porch, a warm cup of tea in his hands, watching the world slow down. He thought about everything, the rush, the savings, the endless plans for someday, but now that someday had arrived, and it looked nothing like he had imagined. He finally realized something powerful. Retirement isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning of the chapter you never had time to write. It's the moment when life whispers, now you can breathe. He remembered how he used to measure his worth by numbers, the size of his house, the digits in his bank account, the car he drove. But none of it had given him the peace he felt now in this small, quiet town. Because in the end, the real wealth was in what he owned. It was in what he felt. Robert smiled softly, thinking about all the people still chasing that perfect number for retirement, and wished he could tell them this. Don't wait for the right moment to start living. The moment you decide to slow down, to truly see life, that's when retirement truly begins. As the wind brushed gently against his face, he closed his eyes and whispered, maybe peace isn't found in a place. Maybe it's found in understanding that you've already arrived. And with that, the story of Robert didn't end. It simply settled into silence, a silence full of meaning, warmth, and life.